In this video, I got 2 unboxings to do, 1 sleeper spec and 1 undervalued key. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, I got 2 unboxings to do with you guys, 1 for a sleeper spec and 1 for an undervalued key. Very, very excited to have both these books in my collection. And then at the end of the video, I might talk a little bit about this idea of taking advantage of live auction bidding. But before I get into the unboxings for you guys, if you could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, I would appreciate it. But let's get into the fun stuff here. It is Christmas morning and we got to open up all these presents. Now, I think I'm doing this in the order in which I plan to talk about it. I think that the first one I'm going to do is the sleeper spec, but I actually don't know which package is which. So if this ends up being the undervalued key, then so be it. We'll talk about that first. But this is one that, you know, I definitely came across this concept for a spec book pretty recently. And one of the reasons for that is because, as you guys know, the channel is called Swaggle Comics and Games. And I do play a lot of games. I play a lot of video games. I play a lot of board games and things like that. And a board game that I have been playing recently is a card game called Marvel Champions. It's by Fantasy Flight Games, and it's a great card game if you're like into things like Magic the Gathering and things like that. It's a really satisfying card game with the Marvel skin. And I've talked about transmedia before and how I put value for spec into other things like video games and other things like board games. I put spec into cartoons because I view Marvel Disney as a business, right? A business that is trying to get, sorry, I'm like talking while doing all this stuff. A business that is trying to get a lot of like cross platform promotion. They're trying to do more with their characters than just like pick the ones that are gonna show up in movies. They're trying to actually have certain characters be established, like through all the different media platforms, video games, books, comic books, movies, TV shows, etc., because they need to create that holistic, business model so that when people go watch the movie and they see the character in it, they can then go out to the store and buy the comic book with the character in it, and then they can also play the board game that has their favorite character in it. So they're always trying to create these synergies. So anyways, I have been playing this Marvel Champions game, and one of the characters you can play in it is Scarlet Witch, and every single character comes with a rival character that is, someone that goes against them. And interestingly enough, the Scarlet Witch rival character was this character right here, the first appearance, and also she had some ties, or the Scarlet Witch character also had ties to the High Evolutionary. So I did some digging, tried to teach myself about this character because I knew nothing about them, and decided to pick this book up here, which is, of course, Uncanny Avengers #3, first full appearance of the character known as Luminous. This is by Rick Remender, came out in 2015, and this is a really interesting spec character for me. Basically, Luminous was created from the genes of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver by the High Evolutionary, and created this like rival character that was like essentially the counter-Earth sort of version of the Scarlet Witch. So to me, it's a really, really cool villain. And then interestingly enough, like, this is a character that, made its appearance or her appearance in this Rick Remender run and only was around for like a few issues specific to the storyline. And then we didn't see her for many, many, many years until recently, just this last X-Men that was released, X-Men #3, the current run by Gary Dugan, he brought back the High Evolutionary and this character right here. And so, to me, that's always going to be like a little bit of a signal, right? Where it's like, why are they bringing this character back now into the comic books? Why are there these rumors of the High Evolutionary going on that's going to show up in Guardians of the Galaxy 3? What is the plans ultimately for the High Evolutionary later on down the line? Scarlet Witch is becoming a bad guy. What's going on with her storyline? So, that got the gears turning and made me want to pick up this book right here. First appearance of this character known as Luminous, first full appearance. And yeah, I'm really, really happy to have this book in my collection now. I think it's a really interesting spec book and one that I'm going to be, keeping tabs with overall. I'm going to start reading that X-Men run to see where they're going with that storyline. Maybe you guys already know, maybe you guys have read it, but this is a really cool cover as well. I mean, I love that it's her first full appearance and also has her battling, Scarlet Witch right there on the cover. So first, Luminous. Who knows what they're going to do with this character? Really interesting one, in my opinion, and one that I think, you know, I think that there's reasons that they do this stuff, right? I think that there's reasons that they decide to use certain characters when they do, and try to get them, you know, utilized in the zeitgeist of the Marvel comic world. All right, let's go on down to the second unboxing here. This one is a very, very cool one. This is what I'm calling an undervalued key. Now, there's been some discussion recently kind of in the comic community space about this idea of, you know, undervalued and what that means. Journo had a good discussion about this. And generally speaking, I kind of agree with his takes in so much as I think undervalued sometimes is overused in our hobby. I think a lot of people say things are undervalued, but really they're basing their undervaluedness simply based on the premise that when they show up in the movie, the comic book is going to go up in value. And that is true. God, the packing on this is so sketch. Sorry, guys. And that is true. But, like, you know, what is the intrinsic value for a book being undervalued? Just because a book is likely to go up in value doesn't mean that the current prices for it are in fact undervalued. In fact, you have to really look at comparables, or at least that's what I tend to do when I talk about undervalued books. I look at, like, okay, here's a book that came out in this year. Here's the current FMV for this book. What are some comparables of other characters or other books that came out at this time, and what are their values? And do I feel like this particular book is undervalued in proportion to that? That's how I usually determine what I feel like is an undervalued book. So I made a book talking about how I felt, you know, first appearance of Nebula was undervalued because I was looking at her comparables to other characters that came out in the same time. So similarly, I did this with this book here, where I talked about this one being undervalued. In fact, one of the very first videos I did on the channel almost a year ago right now, I did mention this book as being one that I felt like was undervalued. And I should have listened to myself back then, because it is more expensive now than it was at that time. But with that said, I do still think that this book is undervalued. And what book am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about X-Men number 60, first full appearance, I guess you might call it, of Sauron, Carl Lycus. And this is a really cool book, a great Neil Adams Silver Age X-Men book. This is one that I've always wanted in my collection. And I spent the last year, you know, going to LCSs, hoping I was going to come across one that was, you know, undervalued, or one that I can, you know, sneak for a good deal. And it just never really happened. Like, I just never found this book being priced at a point that I felt like was going to be a good steal, in my opinion. So I finally decided to be a little more aggressive with this book and pursue it, because, you know, these X-Men keys are getting so crazy expensive. I mean, when we're talking about, you know, like the ones that are around this same time period, where we have like first Sunfire, first Havoc, first Polaris, books like that, those ones are going absolutely to the moon, which is why I feel like a book like this is undervalued. I know that Sauron is not on the same level as Havoc, but when I compare Sauron to other villains that are maybe proportionally around the same level, this book actually does still kind of shape out to be undervalued in comparison to that. So that is pretty cool, in my opinion. Like, when you look at other characters that came around the same time, you look at like Grim Reaper or Ultron or characters like that, and you look at the proportional values, this one is a lot cheaper than I think it should be. So this one is a really cool book. And, you know, I decided to start following all the live auction bidding for this one, just to get a sense of what some of the prices were. And, you know, to me, the best opportunities that you can get for keys that are sort of under the radar is through live auction bidding on eBay or other, you know, markets that you might find live auction bidding, especially ones that end, you know, during the weekday. I think is really important. You got to look at the ones that end during the weekday, because I think people are really in tune on the weekends. And then two, if you can find ones that end early in the morning or late at night, those are the two times that you can really get a steal for a book like this one right here. And I did get a steal, because this is one that ended late at night, and it had very few bids on it, very few watchers overall, and I was able to score this one for $55. Now, with tax and stuff like that, it pushed around 70, but in my opinion, I still thought that this was a great price for a book in this grade. I think that this one is probably, maybe it's a 7. I'd probably say it's probably a 7.0. I would love to get a higher grade eventually, but I think that overall the colors are nice. Only a few spine ticks, no real big color breaking creases. So I thought that it would be a good time to pull the trigger on this one and pick this one up. And yeah, those live auction bids, man, especially for the books that, like, you know, no one is thinking about. Like, no one is really talking about Sauron. I mean, I talked about him a year ago. I'm sure other YouTubers or other people have talked about Sauron as a cool character. But as far as the X-Men keys are concerned, this one feels pretty under the radar. And if you have those books in your mind that you're like, oh, this is a pretty cool book, nobody's talking about it right now, the live auction bids, like, you can get some absolute steals in this current market, even with the prices going all to the moon with all these keys. Anyways, that's all for this video. Those are my 2 books that I picked up. I got this Undervalued key right here, first appearance of Sauron, X-Men number 60, great Neil Adams cover, by the way. And I got Uncanny Avengers number 3, first full appearance of Luminous. A great sleeper spec book, in my opinion. I think it's really interesting that they brought her back into the comic book storyline for X-Men recently. I think it's interesting that they're using her in the board game I really like. So who really knows, if High Evolutionary shows up, we could be getting some Counter-Earth storylines and some Scarlet Witch, Luminous crossover stuff. So anyways, these are the 2 books I picked up. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next one.